of Franchise Direct's Franchise Discovery webinar series. My name is Keith Cannon. I do digital marketing for Franchise Direct, and today we have Imogen Clarke joining us. Imogen is the head of franchise development for Home Instead, which she'll be telling us all about today. So welcome to Imogen. And then leading the webinar today, as usual, is Jerry Foley. So we're live and recording this, and we'll send it out to everyone after. So Jerry, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks very much for the introduction, Keith, and as you say, a warm welcome to Imogen. Home Instead, Imogen, is already a very established brand. It's got a lot of franchisees. It's got a lot of people working for it. Give us an overview of the scale of it and the central theme of what you actually do.
Yeah, of course. And thank you for having me today. So at Home Instead, we were founded in the US and we were established in the UK in about 2005. So we now have 240 franchisees across the UK. And if we're looking at growth, we've got viability for about 50 more new territories. And at the moment, we have about 12 offices for sale. We call them resales. Home Instead is a management franchise, so that means as the franchisee, you aren't delivering the care, but we support you in recruiting team members and caregivers who go out and deliver the care on your behalf. Caregivers and clients are matched, and then they always send the same caregiver to that client. So they can really build up a relationship. That's great because you've got somebody that you know coming into your home, but it also means that the caregiver can monitor that level of care and perhaps build in additional care if needed.
That's an important point, if I could just drop in there, because it is so important not only to the caregiver, but also crucially to the care receiver and their families, that you're dealing as far as possible with the same person and you build up that relationship, and also it's a reassurance.
Oh, completely. So my grandparents have Home Instead care and they have quite a large package. So they have a number of caregivers, but we always know who's coming in when, and we can really monitor that. So it's real reassurance for the family members and the clients at the same time. So our caregivers as well, they don't typically come from a background in care. We see our competitors for recruitment as like M&S, John Lewis, B&Q. So it's a very different profile of caregiver. And it meant that, when the struggles of recruitment were going on, perhaps in the care sector, we didn't have that as badly as those other home care providers. But to support our franchisees, we've got 240 offices, as I said, but we've got a team of 80 here at National Office. So we've got a really strong support ratio of 3 to 1, which is unique for a franchisor of our size.
We'll dig down into the support that you give to existing franchise holders and would-be franchise holders. Just on the point there about selecting the caregivers, because that is key. They are the people who are going into people's homes. So tell us from HQ point of view, when you're advising your existing franchise holders or talking to people who might be interested in becoming one, what are the central messages you give in terms of employing and getting the right caregivers?
Yeah, so we don't look for someone from a background in care, exactly like our franchisees. We're looking for people who are kind of caring and empathetic and passionate, and you can't really teach that. So we're looking for the type of person rather than the experience, because we can train them on how to care. So you'll probably know quite a few people in your lives that would already be really great caregivers. Mums are always a big one. Our franchisees coming in, it's often their mums that they see as the first caregiver. But going back to that, I kind of say, when you were thinking about the lockdown, and you had people that were going into their elderly neighbours' homes and saying, can I get you any food? Can I do the supermarket shop for you? So that they didn't have to go out and expose themselves. Those are the kind of people you're looking for as Home Instead caregivers.
Yeah, real community spirit, which hopefully lives on post the pandemic, and something, as you say, you can tap into. What about then the size of the units, the size of the territory? How does Home Instead configure those, and what kind of sums are we talking about in terms of potentially buying into one?
Of course. So we always look at population. So we've carved out the UK based on a minimum of 25,000 people over the age of 65. We go one step further though, because if you've got 25,000 people in a particular area over the age of 65, they might not be a Home Instead profile for a client. So we look at the demographics as well. We need a more affluent area, but we also need a slightly less affluent area, because you need that blend of client and caregiver, because your growth actually is really going to come from your caregiver recruitment. In terms of, do you mean in terms of investment to?
Yeah, in terms of investment as well. So you said 25,000 people in your unit area territory over the age of 65 as a potential market. But then in terms of investing into it, because we know delivering quality care is an expensive business at both ends, from the care receiver as well as the caregiver point of view.
Yeah, so we're actually in the middle of towards the end of doing a massive pricing research experience. So we're looking at actually where is the price point for higher quality, because we are positioning ourselves at the highest price point. Now that can be anywhere between £25 to £32, but it depends on the area. It can be 40 in some places. So we have done that research to support our franchisees in their prices, because the service is really high quality. You know, it's a minimum of an hour. You've got that matched caregiver, and you've got the team behind you as well to support. And so you would expect to pay a premium for that. So that's why we've done that research, because franchisees can sometimes be scared of putting up their prices. But actually, when it comes to putting up prices, clients very rarely kind of push back on that, because they know that the majority of that increase is going straight to the caregiver.
And then in terms of maintaining the level of quality that you're providing and the commitment you've given to the people receiving the care, how is that sort of monitored to make sure that in future what people have signed up to is actually being delivered? Because that's what people want to know.
Yeah, of course. So from a national office perspective, that's obviously so important to us, because quality is, you know, we're number one in quality. So every single franchisee has a business consultant to support them on business ops and a care consultant to support them on care ops. So the care consultant will both people, they look after about 30 offices at any one time, and they will go out and visit those franchise owners. If we're focusing on care ops, which we are, care consultants will go out and ensure that they are providing a high level of care. So looking at different care plans and records and things like that, making sure they're meeting our standards, and our standards are higher than the regulatory bodies that regulate for care. Then on the actual individual franchisee level, you've got the operating software to ensure that you are meeting those criteria. So you will have team members within your office that are able to report on those. So it's things like regular visits to the clients to make sure that the caregivers are doing everything that they should be, shadowing the caregivers regularly to ensure they're doing the different things and they're being trained well. And then, of course, ongoing training too. So caregivers are initially trained, but then you've got ongoing e-learning training that is monitored at national office and within the local office, as well as kind of classroom-based training like City and Guilds training that we have that have also won the Princess Royal Training Award too.
Well, that's very important to know, because there are a lot of regulations, quite rightly, in place to make sure that people are getting the care that they were promised and everything else. So that is something that Home Instead keeps a very close eye on, and also provides the support and backup, because from the outside it might feel a little bit intimidating if you're not coming from a care background, saying suddenly I'm responsible for the well-being of all of these elderly patients and I've got to make sure I'm meeting the right standards. So you're helping them to achieve those goals.
Absolutely. And yeah, 95% of our franchisees do not come from a background in care. I think we've got one franchisee that has previously owned their own home care company. So the majority of people do not, yes. And that's why, you know, we make sure that our standards are in line with the regulations. When regulations change, you know, we are doing all of that for you and communicating that to the network. So, for example, COVID, you know, we were doing daily COVID comms for our offices with all the different countries to ensure that everybody had the correct information kind of at their fingertips.
You mentioned during COVID, which was very challenging for the whole care industry, but also it came to everybody's attention that England has its own set of rules, Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, and you have tailored packages. So if people are interested in taking over a franchise in Scotland or the north of Ireland or Wales, you have everything in place to make that happen.
Yes, so I mentioned that offices have care consultants. So we have a care consultant that focuses on Scotland, Northern Ireland, Wales, and then a few for England as well. So absolutely, they know their different regulations for the right countries.
And Imogen, you mentioned the fact that there is the possibility of resale. So people who've been with you running a franchise for maybe 10 years decided, they've done it for long enough, but they have an attractive business proposition ready to hand on and to sell on to someone else. So how does that process work from Home Instead's point of view?
Yeah, of course. So a resale can happen at any point, and we mostly see it for retirement when someone's been with us for 10 years plus. It's obviously a conversation with us initially, and what's really important is that they feel secure and safe through that process, because they're so passionate with the Home Instead model. It's quite an emotional journey can be an emotional journey for them. So we've built out an exit journey that supports them in kind of a few different areas. One of them being, well-being, one of them being financial. And so they go through that journey with us. And we have our own brokerage company that supports them in finding the right buyer and getting the right kind of deal for both parties, because obviously as a franchisor we don't want to get involved with that side. So they can have like well-being checks with external coaches that we have. They can speak to the banks for financial information, because the money that they're walking away with, they want to have some idea of what they're going to do with that. For somebody though looking at it as a buyer, it's a real opportunity for growth. So regardless of the size of the business, I would say even our largest territory is only operating with about 1 to 2% of their total market. So there's massive opportunity for growth. And I would say for the resellers, there's probably two ways. So within the territory, you tend to find that an office is really only operating in a certain part of their territory. And so geographically, they're not actually meeting the different areas that they could expand into. So you've got that, where you've got the geographical areas of meeting more older people, their service needs. But then you've also got additional services. So we kind of have our services that we've always done, which is personal care and companionship care. So that's the services you probably think of straight away, like helping somebody in and out of the shower, in and out of bed, taking them to appointments, etc. But we've expanded into different areas to meet franchisee growth opportunities, but also looking at future trends. So we went into live-in care, we've expanded into some forms of medical care, end-of-life care, tech, and a lot of the resellers perhaps aren't using that because they didn't need it to grow. They don't need it to continue to grow, but strategically for someone looking at a resale, they've got these massive opportunities to really look at their business and expand into the different elements too.
Yeah, that's an interesting point in terms of how over the years, the range of services that you can provide to someone who needs help at home is expanding all the time. You touched on some of them. At the basic level, it can be companionship, helping you to be interested in a new subject, go to the doctors with you, to quite sophisticated and detailed living packages. And technology is the other side of it. So that's something that you're tapping into increasingly.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm not sure if you're aware, but we were acquired by a tech company in August 2021. So the company is called Honor, and they have a very similar mission to us. And the guy that steers that company and owns that company, Seth, has a really similar mindset to our founders. So it was a really good match. So he's looked at our tech, and they've got this massive team that are able to build out the pieces of software that we need. And that has, really pushed us forward and catapulted us in comparison to competitors when it comes to tech expansion. So
so it's been a bit of a learning curve for everybody. I mean, Keith here will be keeping an eye on this because he's a bit of a tech guy back in Dublin and Franchise Direct, but already you're beginning to see the changes and the possibilities.
We are, yeah. So, it's things like software to make sure our caregivers are able to position themselves as having more responsibilities and being able to choose their own schedules and less resources for the office. But, looking at the future, the products that will be able to support, we're looking at things like the fridge will be able to detect when our client's out of milk, and we can put an order in so the order is delivered when our caregivers are there. It's little things like that that are just so life-changing that we will be able to put into our offices very quickly.
You're tempted to get one of those, Keith, just as a normal standard to
I was
remind us
just
when we
thinking
have to
I could do one of them in my fridge.
Yeah, but it is important, because then also it keeps family members, very much up to date with exactly what's going on within the home. The other point you want to talk about as well, Imogen, was the idea that sometimes people, having made a success of one unit or one territory, might want to expand, and there are opportunities to run more than one area.
There are, absolutely. And just giving a bit of history on that, we had a few offices that had what we call additional territories, and so they had a larger geographical cover, but they operated it as kind of one very kind of large business. And that was fine, but when it looked at actual growth, comparing them and setting them out, it wasn't doing what it probably should have done for a business of its age. So we kind of were not against multi-unit, but we were quite cautious.
Yeah.
But I would say about 4 years ago, we were at a franchise show and we saw quite a few of our really driven, motivated franchisees who were looking at other brands to purchase. And that was a real wake-up call for us, because those guys, they had these really fantastic teams in their businesses, still do, of course, who are able to run the operational side, who are able to look at growth, and they're really only making these kind of top-level strategic decisions. And for them, that's not feeding that hunger in them to grow. So we expanded into multi-unit, and it's been incredible. So there's certain criteria that our franchisees have to adhere to, like continual growth, having a really established team in the first franchise, being with us for a certain number of years. But it's really exciting because you can look at additional territories, that are close by. So perhaps a new territory that they expand into, or perhaps a neighbouring resale that they might take on as well. And they can really grow those businesses. So it's something that we are really excited about. So we've got some that have 2 as a multi-unit operator, and some that have got kind of 6 and looking at more.
But it's also an example, as you say, of how Home Instead HQ is also changing with the times, because you picked up on that 4 years ago. We've got some very motivated, very successful, running an individual territory. They want to expand. We should be helping them to expand because we know they can do it and do it well.
Absolutely, yeah. We want to reward and make sure that we're giving them exactly what they need in their lives and their businesses.
Now, one thing which we read in the papers every day practically is the demands, and also I suppose the business opportunities, to be frank, in terms of an aging population, plenty of grey-haired people walking around the streets, and an opportunity for more growth in that area. So is this a good time in terms of, do you see the next 5 years as being, a big step up again in business opportunities?
Yeah, we'd say even the next kind of 15 years, definitely. So we had a session with our US colleagues last night, and we were talking about how the aging pyramid has always been this way, but it's completely inverted now. So you've got this elderly group that is constantly growing, and we are there to meet the needs. Now that is obviously with recruiting new caregivers, but it's also those new services and the tech that will support as well.
And what kind of level of interest are you getting? Because one of the things throughout these webinars, people have been talking about the fact that the crisis of the pandemic, had so many different elements to it. But one way in which it did impact people is that they started to reevaluate what they wanted to do with their own future work opportunities. Are you finding, as we begin to slowly ease out of the pandemic, that more people are interested in running their own business, and this is an area they'd like to get into?
Yeah, so even during the pandemic, 2020 was one of our biggest, most recent years for
really?
New franchisees. Yeah, we brought on 16 new franchisees in 2020.
Wow.
So Yeah, we have seen a lot more people thinking, actually, I want to do something that matters. And that is exactly what we look for. That's the first thing we look for. We look for somebody that is passionate and empathetic and meets our culture. They, of course, want to run a successful business, but that is their drive. And I think that's where our quality comes from, because us at National Office, our franchisees, their team members, their caregivers, we all want to make a difference in somebody's life. So that it's definitely made people consider and start looking at something slightly different.
And how long does that process take in best case scenario? So if someone after today's discussion said, yeah, that sounds like something I really would be interested in, there's a lot of hurdles to go through, and there have to be hurdles to go through to make sure that the care given is of the right quality. But roughly, what kind of time frame are you talking about?
So we would say, it dependent on them and how quickly they wanted to move, but anywhere between 3 to 6 months.
That's pretty achievable, I would have thought.
Yeah, with a resale, it's usually a little bit longer because you've got a third party that's selling their business. But for new, easily doable in 3 months.
And then, as you say, if 2020 you had 16 new territories opening up, I mean, that was a pretty busy year. But you're at the stage where you're saying, look, this is a developing market. This is one, as you mentioned, a 15-year time horizon. So there's plenty more opportunities out there.
That there is, absolutely, yes. So with the territories left for new territories, we're obviously making sure that they are viable. We'd never sell a territory that didn't have the right demographics. And then, as I said, you've also got the resales too.
You mentioned early on, just in passing, about your grandparents and everything else. I mean, what have you learned? Because, you know, we all know people who need care, and we've all experienced that directly through family or friends of family and everything else. So what kind of feedback have you been getting from people who've been using your services? Not necessarily those who are direct clients, but have you heard anecdotally how it's working?
Yeah, and I smiled because so it's usually the daughter of the family that finds the care, and so it was my mum that found care. And although I've worked at Home Instead for 8 years, they actually went somewhere else first. And it was Home Instead are quite expensive. Let's try this other company. And I'd never name names, but my mum was hounded by those carers every single day because the office doesn't manage any of it. So it's all the carers just speaking to her. The ambulances were coming around all the time because the carers weren't trained properly. Now we have Home Instead. You know, my mum has this portal where we can all log into and look at the notes and things like that, because we do have a number of different caregivers, but it's nice to just see that anyway. And so from our experience, it's been one of real stress and constantly having to go over to their home to support the carers to everything goes very, very well, very comfortably, and we can visit them as family members, not as carers. But, you know, generally we get very, very good feedback from our clients. And I think a big part of it is that personal element and having the same caregiver or caregivers so they can build up those relationships. And that's evidenced in, you know, our CQC ratings, which is the regulatory body in England, as well as homecare.co.uk, which is, I like to say it's a website like TripAdvisor, but for home care companies. So we're consistently winning those awards too, and they're based on real reviews. Yeah,
and you mentioned there the Care Quality Commission, CQC, which is the regulatory body, and you've won a lot of awards on that. But the most important testimony is from the people who are satisfied and their families feel reassured, which is what we started with in terms of having that individual one-to-one relationship building up and everything else. There is a point actually though you mentioned again about how it is the case quite often it's the daughter or the female within the family who has to do it. So to Keith and myself, it's time for us guys within a family not to sort of say, you sort that out for mum. It's something which the whole family should be involved in.
Definitely. And yeah, so it is normally we call them the dominant daughter, but obviously if it's a family, and we call her Kathy, but if it's a family of sons, we would call him, actually funnily enough, Keith. We've done a lot of market research. It took about a year actually to find out who Kathy and Keith are, and how they communicate, how they look at things online, how they search for care. It was before COVID. So it was in-person groups, it was online conversations, it was Q&As, things like that. And we actually built out the journey of looking for care and changed our website to reflect that as well, and changed all of our marketing materials to speak to the different Cathys in the ways that they're used to being spoken to and want to be spoken to as well.
Well, I hope Keith is taking a few notes, being a marketing specialist in Dublin. But that is interesting also, that you're looking at how do you best represent to the people who are going to be looking at the potential of organising care. So you've sort of adjusted your own terms and then give the level of commitment and reassurance to them that this is the service you're looking for.
Yeah, and it's a big thing to consider because, when you think of home care, you think, oh, well, it'll have to always be like over the phone and in person because that is what the clients want. Yes, that might be what the clients want. It might not be because they might be used to using tablets and things like that. But that might be. But actually, Cathy is very used to buying things in a certain way and speaking to people and finding information in a very different way. And we need to be very mindful of that. And I think sometimes, the care sector can be quite slow to change, and that is something that we do not do. We need to be constantly evolving to meet the needs of not only our clients but the family members as well.
Well, you've certainly made a persuasive case for how the opportunities are there, but also, as I say, the quality of care that the individual will receive as a result of using some of your services. Keith, just in terms of, you're going to put a lot of this information and follow up with it.
Yeah, I'll send out an email afterwards with everything.
Yeah, and Imogen, just as we're coming towards the end of our conversation, I mean, you covered a lot of territory. Is there any other particular area that you think people should know if they're interested in getting involved in the whole care sector via you?
Obviously, if anyone is interested, please just get in touch with us and we can send over, the right amount of information that you want, whether it's an initial call, whether it's just looking at where your local territory is. Please, that's my role and our team. We're here to help. The other thing I would probably just mention is the funding options. So we're an established franchisor. We've got really great relationships with particular banks who have really great franchising teams. And so for them, they're very comfortable funding 70% of our franchisees, whether that's new or resale. With a new, so the total investment for a new is about £110,000, and so they're very comfortable funding 70%, and that is always over a 5-year loan because that's evidenced from the network. Everyone has paid back that loan within 5 years, and they do interest only for the first 18 months to support the cash flow. So they know our P&Ls really well, they know our model really well, and so they're very, very comfortable doing that. And then for a resale, again, 70%. Potentially a bit higher depending on the prospective franchisee, but it completely depends. But then they can be more flexible because we're obviously a well-established franchisor. The model is consistently growing and the banks can see that. And so they are more flexible with loan terms. So that might be 5 years, it might be 7, it might be longer, depending on the amount that you are borrowing and the cash flow within the business as well.
Well, again, that's good to know because, as you say, the banks that you use know the model intimately, know the timeline for making it a successful, profitable one. But all of that is there in the background to help people who might be interested in getting involved. So there's no real excuse then in terms of being questioned about your finances, as long as you can meet the criteria that you and also then the banks in terms of any loans and facilities. So hopefully it looks like 2022 will be a busy year ahead for you. All going well, Imogen?
Yeah, definitely. Whether that's new we've already got 6 new franchisees that are going to be joining us this year. We have a few multi-unit and we have a few resales coming up too. So yeah, hopefully nice and busy.
And I just want one last question in terms of each unit. Roughly how many people are employed within that unit to make it a successful operation?
So it grows year on year. So we have built out our own organizational structure. And it's based on client numbers and then revenue. as well. So you can look at where your business is at, and then your business consultant will be there almost kind of to prompt you if you're not kind of looking at it and saying, I think maybe now's the time you brought on this person to the team, or this person, or wherever you are. So we've actually mapped out our franchise journey, and so it's based again on kind of revenue, so you can see where you sit in this journey and how you get to the next stage. So we've kind of looked at that completely. So obviously in the beginning it's yourself and a team member that we support you in employing, but our largest offices have an office team of 20, 25, and it just depends on their client numbers and revenue.
And as you say, it's all done step-by-step, guided process. This is where you should be moving to, thinking about employing these type of people at this stage of the business cycle for you.
Yeah, so you always know where you're going and what you're planning. Of course, you can ignore our advice. It's your business. But we're here to support you in growing really successful, but also high-quality businesses too.
Well, that sounds like good advice, but as you say, people are always free to make their own decisions, and that's the way it should be. So, from my point of view, Imogen, it's been very interesting. I actually learned quite a lot of your whole business model and continued success. As you say, with 6 new units already lined up and plenty more opportunities, it sounds like it's a good time to be looking at what you have to offer. Keith, do you want to wrap it up? And
yeah, no, that was brilliant. Thank you very much, Imogen. It sounds like anyone who joins Homestead is in safe hands. And the tech side, I like the tech side coming in. I think, like, even as people get older and, like in 20 years when I have to maybe look for care from my parents, I'd be looking for the tech side, it's very important. So I think that's great that you have that on board, and whoever took you over has a whole background in that. I think that's brilliant. So, yeah, I think very informative. Thank you very much for coming on today.
No, thank you for having me. I've really enjoyed it.
Thanks very much, Imogen.
There's no questions at the moment, but I'm going to send out an email with the recording, a link to request information from you guys, and I'll send that out today.
Great.
Okay, thanks very much.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Jerry. Thanks, Imogen.
Thanks.
Bye now.
Bye.